My favorite is the one where the car comes off and it says, "Do not attempt" in the corner. As if I was thinking, you know what would be fun today? Let's drop a car off the back of a car hauler and just see what happens. So just don't try that, okay? Take the tip, heed the warning, don't try that. Good morning, everybody. How are we doing? All right, if you're online, thank you for joining us. Thanks for being a part of things today. If let's just cut to it, okay? Yes, I am a semi-pro wrestler, as I see in the corner. I work out on the daily, as you can tell. This shirt barely fits anymore, so no, okay. Hey, I don't know if you've ever experienced moments in life that just suck. Moments where you walk around and go, man, this is the absolute worst. Or you think, I've hit rock bottom, and then all of a sudden you realize there's a basement to rock bottom. Like the floor just gives out, and you realize there's even more depth that can be experienced, even more pain that you can walk through. Because if we're being honest, sometimes life can really suck the life right out of you. Just life. And you got nothing in your tank, and you realize that I'm running on empty, and empty even is maybe not even the best word. I'm on extra empty. And we're still just trying to survive. We're still trying to take things forward, but we don't know how because life just sucks. Maybe you're in a moment where a relationship that matters that's dear to you is crumbling. Maybe you've got a friendship that you've just relied on this friend your whole life, and now all of a sudden they turn their back on you. And I don't know what to do with that. And that sucks, and you have to work through that. Other times we experience moments where we lose a job. Or things shift, and now all of a sudden our financial resources that were carrying us through, that we were relying on to help us, pay for groceries, is gone. And what do we do? And that sucks. Maybe you've walked through a really hard divorce, and it's the pits. Everything about it is the pits. I've experienced a lot of these moments in my life. I know you've experienced them in your life, and whether you're in one of those moments now or not, you will be at some point in your life. Life will take the life right out of you sometimes. I've experienced moments where some very near and dear friends of mine that I had walked through life with for years just turned their backs and started throwing punches instead of hugs. And that hurts. And it's hard to walk through those moments. I've experienced depression. I've experienced loss of a loved one where all of a sudden they're just not around anymore and you can't just call them. And everything changes. And it sucks. And it's hard. I've experienced those moments. I've walked through moments with my son. If you're a parent and you walk through hurt and heartache with your kids, you know how much that hurts to walk through that with them, where for 2 years we were trying to figure out a diagnosis for my son and what was going on with all his stuff until we found that it was Crohn's disease, and now we walk through the rest of his life helping coach him through that, helping guide him through that, and treatments for that. Like, it's hard. Life is hard. Life is hard sometimes. And the question that we have to face when we get to all of that is, what do you do when life sucks? What do you do when you're at the bottom, when you're in the pits? Like the pits, because let's be real, pit happens. It does. It does, and it happens regularly. Some of you think, boy, that's funny, because I throw an extra letter in there or two, and you change that around. And I'm not here to judge or say anything. I get it. Like, we experience the worst of the worst sometimes. And it can steal every ounce of joy out of us. It can rob us of our hope. It can rob us of so much that goes on that's so good all around us. And I sit down with people all the time, like, who will come into my office and who will talk to me about what's going on in life, and they're just at rock bottom, and they throw it all out there, and they're wrestling with some of the hardest questions you'll ever wrestle with in faith. Because tough moments like this, when you're in the pit, it forces you into a personal moment of crisis, but often into a spiritual moment of crisis too, because you're going, well, why do bad things happen to good people? And why would God allow pain and suffering in this world? And why would he ever let me be in the situation that I'm in? Those are hard moments and hard questions to ask. Sometimes those are the hardest questions of your whole faith that you have to wrestle with in those moments, to go, why? Why would God allow this? Why is this happening to me? Why am I where I'm at? And I'm going to go ahead and tell you, like, I've asked those same questions. I acknowledge those same moments in my life. Some of you are here because you've given up on God or given up on the church in the past, and you've been wrestling with those questions. And, like, seriously, God bless you for being here and asking those questions, because we exist for people like you to ask those questions, to come to grips with their faith, to try to figure out who is this Jesus person and why in the world is this what life has dealt me. I'm glad you're here. I've experienced some of those same moments. I've asked the same questions. I get it. I get it. And we're going to talk about that today. And I'm going to talk to you about a dirty little secret that most pastors don't allow you to think about. You ready for this? You have permission to wrestle with your doubts. You have full permission. Some people will tell you, just hide it, it's fine, have faith and move forward. And you should have faith and you should move forward, but it's okay to acknowledge that this moment, this pit sucks, and to wrestle with it. In fact, all of the Bible is full of people who are wrestling with their faith and who have moments of doubt and who are trying to come to grips with what's going on and how do I make sense of this and how is God at work in the middle of this because I feel anything but that. And that's where we begin this series. What do you do when life sucks? What do you do? And how do we move forward? And my hope and my prayer for this series is that we will realize and we will come to a better understanding that there is a God who loves you and who is a good God, and he teaches us what to do when life sucks. And so we'll take those tools and we'll move forward and we'll walk through life together through these moments. But let me start with a passage today. Let me start with a teaching from the stepbrother of Jesus. Now, I don't know if you have a sibling in your life where you thought they are just completely nuts. Now, put yourself in the shoes of the stepbrother of Jesus and try to make sense of what's going on around you. Okay, this is James, and we're going to be in James chapter 1. James is toward the very, very end of your New Testament, the second half of your Bible. If you want to flip to the very end, you can just come forward a little bit or jump in online. You can search us up, use the YouVersion Bible app, any of those tools, or just watch what's on the screen, okay? But James is a stepbrother of Jesus, and honestly, I'd imagine James went through life thinking, what is going on? Like, that would be my question all throughout life. What in the world is going on? How do I make sense of this? Like, this is, okay, it's my mom's, but also he's like the son of God. And now I'm watching this, and if you've ever like lived in your older brother's shadows, amplify it, okay? You're like, your brother's Jesus, okay? And you're walking through life, and everybody's paying attention to him, and you're just kind of waving and watching from the sidelines, right? He wrestled with all sorts of stuff. And while you may not read any passage that says James really struggled with his faith because his brother was Jesus, it's implied because he's real. He's a human, okay? He's experienced these things. And now James goes out after Jesus is gone, and he continues to plant churches, and he continues to carry this ministry forward, which shows me a depth of faith in him, that he was willing to say, that was my brother, and that was the Son of God, and to go share that with the world, and to share the message that Jesus had brought his whole ministry career. And James, seeing people struggling, offers the advice that no one who's struggling wants to hear. Verse 2, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, when you face trials. Yeah, right. Like, if you've ever experienced trials, the last thing you want is somebody coming up to you and going, it's okay, just put a smile on your face. You're fine. Shake it off. Shake it off. Shake it off. I don't know why that came into my mind. I'm going to go ahead and erase that and pretend it never happened. You didn't see anything. We'll edit that out online later. But here's James in this moment going, you know what? Life is hard. And instead of just sitting there and wallowing and realizing that life is hard and going, well, this is just it, he actually gives follow-up. And he says, yes, it's okay to acknowledge that sometimes there's pain and suffering and sorrow, but guess what? You got to find the joy in it somewhere. You can't stay there. And here's where he continues in the verse. Let's throw that back up there. Consider it joy because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. What he's saying is when you're struggling, that's when you have the opportunity to grow. When you're wrestling with some of these hard questions, it's going to force you to come to grips with who you are, with what your faith looks like, and how you find God in the middle of the mess. It is good for you to experience those moments because it will grow the depth of your faith. And why does that matter? Because if we let perseverance finish its work, we can be mature and complete, not lacking in anything. That means we have the opportunity to grow in the midst of hurt, in the midst of heartache, in the midst of life's sucky moments. If I were to paraphrase what James is saying in this, I would say this: you can suffer and succeed at the same time. It exists. They can coexist. You can suffer and succeed at the same time. We don't often think of those two together. We think I'm living my best life, or I am in the pit. We don't often think, boy, I'm in the pit. This is great. I'm doing awesome work. Yet we do in other areas of our life. For instance, in my many, many, many trips to Planet Fitness where I work out on the regular. I do fairly regularly, okay? As you do the hard work of lifting weights and you see results. It produces results. You know that you're growing as a result of it. In fact, this last week on Wednesday, I was there and I was working hard. Like I was dripping a lot. My shirt was more than slightly damp. And I went back into the locker room and a friend of mine who I've known for years was in there and I was getting ready to change and head to work. I shower first, by the way. Staff, you're welcome. I'm in there and he looks at me dripping in sweat and he's like, oh, just a half workout today? I'm like, oh no, buddy, don't even go there. I worked hard and I was about to give him garbage and I turned around and looked and he wasn't wearing pants. So that conversation ended. True story. Not the place to pick a fight. But we know that suffering and growth can happen simultaneously. We know that you can suffer and you can succeed at the same time. But what we fail to realize is that sometimes when we celebrate the high moments of life, when you're on top of the mountain, when you're celebrating all of the victories, when you're celebrating the fact that you have arrived, you have achieved something great, life is going awesome, sunshine, rainbows, unicorns, flowers all around you, it's your best life. We look at those moments and we contrast those with the moments when you're in the valley. And those moments suck because you're down here and you have to work hard. And you're not seeing the victory, and you can't look out over the horizon and just admire the sunrise. Like you're working hard. But you got to also understand that things grow better in the valley than they do on the peaks. You will not find a farm on top of a mountain. You find it in the valley. That's where growth happens. The peaks are fun. We'll celebrate those all day long. But the valley is where you grow. And the valley is the moment where you have to do the work and produce the crops. That is where it works. If I were to look at another example, there's a person in the Old Testament, the first half of the Bible, before Jesus shows up, and in fact, even in the very first book of the Bible, named Joseph. And Joseph was one of many siblings. In fact, there's a musical written about his life, which is quite fantastic. His amazing multicolored Technicolor Dreamcoat. Joseph was the favorite son. I was the favorite son. I can relate. I also know at least one of my brothers is watching online, so take that. And his brothers hated that he was the favorite. They hated it with every part of themselves. And so they got together and they made a plan. We're going to kill him because then this won't be an issue. So they come up with their plan, and then they decide that's probably too extreme to just take him out. And so they instead throw him into a well, an empty well. In fact, you might even call it a pit. And now here's Joseph, who did nothing wrong, in the bottom of a pit. And he's experiencing that. And then all of a sudden, these other people come by, these Midianites, and his brother's like, you know what, that's probably not great. Let's just sell him, because then we can get something for it. So they sold their brother. I thought about that as a kid. I was never successful. But they sold him to the Midianites, who then turned around and sold him to Potiphar, who was in in Pharaoh's leadership. Pharaoh led all of Egypt. And so now here's Joseph in Pharaoh's control, who rises up in the ranks, who has this gift of interpreting dreams. And Pharaoh realizes it. And because of his gift of interpreting dreams, in that moment, he realized that there's going to be a famine, there's going to be a drought, and so we got to save up crops. And when we save up crops, then our people will live when there's a drought. And he does it, and he succeeds, and he becomes the second in command to Pharaoh himself. He rises up from the pit. And this is how it's recorded in the book of Acts as it recounts this story. Because the patriarchs were jealous of Joseph, they sold him as a slave into Egypt. But God, those are two very important words. But God was with him and rescued him from all of his troubles. He gave Joseph wisdom and enabled him to gain the goodwill of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And so Pharaoh made him ruler. You don't get to know the rest. That's it. Over Egypt and all of his palace. He rose up in the ranks. He did something with the fact that life sucked. He stayed true. He worked hard. He found an opportunity to take a step forward. And in fact, at the end of Genesis, Genesis 50, there's this moment where his brothers come looking for him because they need food. And he says in chapter 50, this great line is super poetic to his brothers. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what's now being done, the saving of many lives. It's super poetic. What I think he meant to say was, suck on that, boys. Like, that's the way I would have said it. Seriously though, like, come on, like, you tried to do this, but God had a better plan, and God never left me, and God never deserted me, and yes, the moments were hard. But there's a way forward, and it doesn't have to stay that way. You can keep moving, you can suffer, and you can succeed at the same time. Sometimes we look at those moments and go, well, this is the worst, this is pain. God's surely not here, like this is not what, no. Here's my statement. Just because things aren't going your way doesn't mean that God is not working. God is always working. God has never stopped working. And just because life is hard doesn't mean that he has abandoned you. It doesn't mean that everything is in crumbles and God has left you for whatever. Like, no, he is with you and he is there and ready to lead you forward. God is working. Sometimes we can look at these hard moments and we can put the blame on God and say, God, you did this. Or other times we just play victim. Both of those narratives are dangerous narratives. You don't move forward in those. You don't develop faith in those. You don't grow as a person in those. This is a moment that God is still with you, able to bring you through. You just have to move forward. It's okay to not be okay, but it is not okay to stay that way. You've got to step forward. You got to move out of where you're at. And just because life dealt you a bad hand, it doesn't mean that your story's over. It is a season. Seasons come, seasons go. They have a beginning, they have an ending point. When you're in the middle of a season, you think this is it, it's never going to change, this is it for the rest of my life. That is not true. You can move forward. You can keep growing. Joseph shows the perspective. When you're in the bottom of the pit, this is what you only have one place you can look. Up. That's it. And in our lives, there is no pain-free formula for an easy life, but there is hope. My friend Dr. Jerry Lounsbury taught me this. Jerry passed just a couple of weeks ago. Jerry was one of our elders and a counselor for decades. And so I picked his brain on this series. I picked his brain on a lot of different series because the man was oozing with wisdom. And this line came up in our conversation. In certain valleys, there's nothing but up. And we can look all around us and go, wow, this is terrible. Or we can choose to look up and to find hope and to find joy and to find a way forward. God is there. God is stirring. God has not left you. Look up to the source of hope. And can I remind you of something else? Life is really hard. You know that? So don't do it alone. Quit. We all have this tendency inside of us that, well, this is hard. I'm just going to turn in and I'm going to fight through the pain and we're going to... No, stop. You were never meant to do life alone. You were never meant to walk through these hard moments with all the strength that you can muster, and that's it. We have a community around us, like whether that's your small group, which get connected to a small group. If you're not in a small group, those are people who get to walk through life with you. The good moments, the bad moments. Or it's just being a part of a community like this that can speak life into you, that can encourage you, that can help you to take these steps forward. And if you're on the top of the mountain, on top of the world, celebrating that, guess what? You get to look down and help somebody up. You get to help them see joy. You get to help them remember that this is not the end of the story, that your story is not done. Keep moving forward. Keep looking up. Keep finding hope. Life is hard. In fact, we have this new thing I'm excited about as a church. Where we're calling it our Radical Generosity Fund, that we're setting aside funds every month to give toward needs that show up just because, like just to meet them, to be radically generous because we have a God who is radically generous with us. And so we got wind in this last couple of weeks, there were a bunch of students in the Mount Pleasant area that are struggling to keep up with school lunches because it was free for 2 years in the COVID season. And now it's not anymore. And there are a lot of families that are struggling with that. And we found out that the free and reduced students are still having trouble back paying, and life is hard. We get it. And so they're like, we got about $1,500 in lunch debt. And we're like, done. We got it. And so this last week, we covered that on behalf of the church, and we've taken some of that load off of people to be able to help people see that there is hope and joy and alleviate some of that pressure, because we all know what it's like to be in the pit. Maybe you're there right now and you need that source of hope. I get it. Hope exists. Maybe you're on top and you can help somebody climb up. That is all available to us, all of it. I think about like different moments that I've expected God to show up in different ways than he actually did. Like there are many of those moments in my life where I'm like, oh, okay, God, clearly this is what you have for me. Oh, no, that wasn't it. It was over here. Like maybe you can relate to that. As a church, we've had moments like that. Just before the pandemic hit, we were looking at some property on Mission Street that we thought was going to be a storefront we would move into and build a church out of. And so we prayed for about a year over that and just pursued that and sought that. And God understood better than we did, because shortly before we were ready to sign the dotted line and start making payments and moving in and doing all of this, the pandemic hit, and we would have been stuck with a facility we couldn't pay for a year and a half. Well, that wouldn't have worked. But God was looking out for us. And because of that, he's led us to a better place, which now we have purchased 10 acres of land in town, and we get to build our dream home. And I'm super excited because there's room for a Chick-fil-A in front of our building. And so, like, we're going to have, maybe not, but I can dream, okay? Like, I'm going to dream all day long about that one, because we want to be somewhere that people go 7 days a week or have available 7 days a week. Chick-fil-A is closed on Sunday, so we'll just do church. And then the other 6 days, we'll enjoy the Lord's chicken. I think it's a great plan, so just store that one away. Here's what I love about Jesus, the person of Jesus. Jesus was the Son of God, fully human, which means he experienced the same suffering that we have. We don't have a God who can't understand. We don't have a God who hasn't been there. We have a God who sent his Son to die for us, and who took all of the pain and all of the suffering and knows exactly what it's like to have a friend turn their back on you, who knows exactly what it's like to do something good and have somebody over here spin it for bad. He knows exactly what it's like to experience the death of a friend. He knows exactly what it's like to walk through the hard moments of life, to be tempted, to try to figure out, what do I do with the mess that's right in front of me? And in the face of that, he went all the way to the cross and died on your behalf, on my behalf, so that we can experience life after this. That that's not the end of the story, because 3 days later, he rose from the dead, and he showed that we can have life, that we can have eternal life, even after this one, that we can be with God, that God is with us. That's what he showed this whole time. And in just a few moments, we're going to witness baptisms here in the room, which I love celebrating baptisms. This is a picture of being buried and raised to new life with Christ. It's the story of Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection. That we are made new, that we are made into the image of Christ, that our life continues forward. This is a moment of public declaration of faith, that I'm going to give this everything that I've got, and I'm going to trust in Jesus. This is, as Romans says, we are therefore buried with him through baptism into death, in order that just as Christ was raised from the dead through the glory of the Father, we too may have a new life. That's what we're going to celebrate. That is the life that's available to each of us. So when you're in the pit, remember that Jesus has not abandoned you. God has not left you. God knows exactly where you're at. He is right there with you. So keep looking up and ask God to meet you in the pit. He's not afraid to be there with you. In fact, he came to be there with you, to help give you hope and to help move you forward. That is not the end of your story. Keep moving forward. This morning, as we have baptisms, Vanessa's going to come introduce the people who are getting baptized this morning. We're going to cheer them on. We're going to celebrate like crazy. But if you have never made a public declaration of faith that Jesus is your Lord and Savior, today is the best day ever. We're ready. And if you're thinking, boy, I've thought about baptism before, or I've never thought about baptism, and I want to talk to somebody, come talk to us right now, because the water's here. Let's do it. We got extra clothes. We got extra towels. You'll be fine. It'll be awesome. And we're going to cheer you on like crazy. And for the others who are here ready to get baptized, we're going to cheer them on like crazy, because this is a moment of trusting in Jesus. This is a moment of being raised to new life with Jesus. If you're in the pit and you need hope, don't stay where you are hopeless. Walk forward. Let us help you walk forward. The Connect card link is on the back of your seats, or if you're watching online, it's there in the links. If you are just struggling right now with where you're at and you need help, you want somebody to pray with you, we want to pray with you. We want to help you move forward. You can write your story in that prayer request, or you can just write the word, "Pit happens." We'll know what it means, okay? We get it. And we'll help carry you forward. We'll help you walk forward in faith. If you're in a moment where you're ready to take a next step spiritually, whether you need to trust in Jesus and let him lead you forward for the first time or after years of running, let us know. If we can be praying for you in any way, let us know, because we want to do this journey together as we trust in Jesus, as we let him lead us forward. Let me pray. God, this morning we put our hope in you. God, whether this is the first time we've put our hope in you, a day of returning to you after years of running, or today is a new day and a new opportunity to trust in you, God, would you fill us with your hope and strength, that even when life is hard, you are there with us, and you will guide us, and you will lead us forward with your strength and with your power and with your energy and with your spirit at work inside of us. And this morning, as we celebrate baptisms, Lord, I pray that your spirit fills this room and fills the life of everyone who comes forward in faith. God, would you lead us and guide us forward? God, we ask for your work and your power, that when we feel hopeless, when we feel like we're at the bottom of the pit, that we